Hello, my friends, and welcome to a space where pleasure is treasured, relaxation is not what you think it is, and life firing on all cylinders is what we're about. If you are somebody who wakes up every day asking for way more, consider this your happy place. Welcome to the Creation of Living podcast. I'm your host, Heather Nichols. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Creation of Living podcast. I am your host, Heather Nichols, and here this week with a very dear mentor, friend, teacher of mine, John Friend, who has been an absolute pioneer, really, in the world of movement, yoga, and now Bowspring Movement for many, many decades. And somebody who knows more about the body than anybody that I've ever met. And also, it's just always willing to really explore what else is possible with our body and our structure and our movement and healing and so many things. There aren't really sufficient words to introduce you, John, but thank you so much for being here.
Wow, thank you, Heather. Yeah, it's great to connect on this with you.
Yeah. Well, so one of the things that right before we started recording, I asked, how is there anything in particular that you want me to say when I introduce you? Because again, you have such a lengthy, robust, beautiful history, of all the things that you've created and contributed to the world and to the world of movement and bodies. And you talked about pushing the boundaries, and a lot of the work that I do outside of Bowspring, the access consciousness work that I do, it's very much about that. It's about exploring beyond what we think, beyond the constructs of what we've decided is true about anything. And I think that's one of the reasons I love the Bowspring movement so much, of which you and Desi Springer have created and developed, and I now teach. And I think it's one of the things that I just really love about Bowspring is that it really does push the boundaries on what we think we're supposed to be doing with our bodies, and is such an invitation to exploring a different universe, really. And one of the reasons that I just fell in love with it so fast and deep, and continue to every day. So share with us a little bit about just your evolution and your history of constantly being on the creative edge of the world of bodies and movement.
Yeah, thanks. It's funny because in some ways, I don't think that I'm trying to push the boundaries, but I do try to push the boundary of excellence, and if I'm serving another person in the role of therapist or teacher, I just want to do the best I can for them to, help them in any way I can. And in so doing, a lot of the times I'm dealing with somebody who is coming to me more as almost a last resort because they've been to a lot of other professionals and standard model doctors and therapists, and they're just at their wits' end. So they're trying me or a method that they don't understand at all. They maybe have heard something positive from somebody like yourself, and you referred them to me. But so they're just being open-minded. But when I started working with Desi was doing things that I just had to open my mind to try to understand. Why does this work? Why is this so effective? And I started to incorporate it even before I fully understood it because it worked. Well, now that was 13 years ago when we first started to work together. And since I've been able to really have much more of a good understanding and be able to deconstruct it and scientifically, why does this really work? And it's been really surprising to me that we are kind of on the front edge. We have been avant-garde, and it's surprising because I would think, wow, why didn't somebody think of this before? And I look at myself because I started when I was a kid, and I went through so many years professionally and teaching people ideas, biomechanical principles that now I see being not only limited, but in many regards just inaccurate or invalid.
Yeah.
And in so doing, some of those things were actually kind of harmful. And of course, it was not my intention, but that was what was that at the, I thought, hey, I'm doing the best work, out there. And now retrospectively, I thought, wow, it was so limited. So it's been this whole journey of keeping my mind open to, really what works, and then trying to go back and analyze it to have there's got to be reasons why it works. So it's been really fun for me to hang out with Desi Springer because she's just inherently innovative, cutting edge, just who she is.
Yeah.
And she's not really interested so much in necessarily coming up with the objective reasons why it works. I'm more into the science of it. Like, there's got to be reason for this. She's more of just like, this is intuitive. This is what I feel is right, and I'm doing it. And she never did it for uh, some sort of expansion of a business sense. I even remember when I first started to work with her more professionally in a business uh, a co-founder, if you will, of the method. I told her, Desi, this is not going to be so popular. You're not going to be able to really make a business out of this thing. I know it works, but this is so out there that it's going to be hard for people to understand. And so that's actually, of course, been true. But over the years, we've been able to now make it more accessible, more palpable for people. And it has spread now into many countries, and it continues to grow a lot. So it's really been fun.
Yeah. Well, you know, doing what works, that is like uh, something that is, we talk a lot in the access consciousness work that I do. We talk a lot about the pragmatics of things, and it's interesting because what is pragmatic is what works, right? And
Mhm.
that so often, from my perspective and the way I see the world, it's like you have to start with the energy, and but yet that's not how we're, trained and educated and all of that. But when you're functioning from the energy of something, like truly, and getting more into what that is and having a greater awareness of it, that's the most pragmatic way to approach anything,
Yeah.
And so and Bowspring does work, energetically, physically, like in every way. I've seen so much miraculous change with it, with my own body and the bodies of other people, in ways that I just could never achieve before. And so it makes sense to me that, and it does, I think people have to be. It makes sense that people are drawn to it and it's growing. And there's also a certain type of person who's willing to go against what has been before, to explore new terrain, uh, and and a lot of times, like you mentioned, that does happen when somebody, not always, but when somebody is nothing has worked, and they're really kind of like that last resort thing you mentioned. And that's not always why people come to Bowspring, of course.
Mhm.
But but it's really cool to have, because I had a little bit of that with my own body, and then it was just like it opened up, like there was just this huge universe that opened up, and so it started as kind of, nothing else has worked, let me try this. And then it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, this is phenomenal, this is like a whole world that just kept inviting me into more. So
I like what
um,
you say, though. I think this is an important point about when we think about what works, instead of just thinking it more on the outside physical, because someone comes in for a pain in their shoulder or their low back, and we can remedy that um, in many regards fairly quickly. But I think Desi and I are both more interested in a deeper, energetic. So when, even if, let's say that we have somebody that clears their pain in their low back, but they're still internally kind of miserable, it's like we feel like, wow, we really didn't make that much of a difference, you see.
Mm,
So we think, well, if they leave and they feel better about themselves, they had a shift about how they're even regarding themselves. They have an energetic shift that's deeper in their self identity.
mm.
That seems to me to be a more profound, pragmatic effect, so that's really where we're interested in the whole thing, that it's not just the physical, but all the way to the soul.
Yes. Well, and that's really the like that elixir, of like when I do a Bowspring practice, it's like, yeah, my body feels great, and it's like, and I can feel all kinds of things healing and changing. And it's this like vibrancy and sense of like just bringing myself to the world as all of me that's the thing that really has made it, a beautiful addiction for me. I'm just like, I require this every day,
Yeah.
and even 10 minutes of it is just so, it's so homeopathic, that
Hmm.
10 minutes of it is very powerful, and longer can be great too. Um, but and I want to kind of just for a moment back up because I know that there will be people listening to this that very much know Bowspring, and then also those who are like, "What are you talking about?"
Hmm. Yeah.
So, can you just kind of tell us what is Bowspring?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah. It's
very
good.
difficult to describe, but
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's difficult because our orientation is based on what we know, which it is more related to the world of yoga. I mean, Desi and I both come out of the world of yoga. I started doing yoga when I was just a young teenager. Gosh, it was over 50 years ago, and I taught yoga starting in 1980. But 13 years ago, when Desi and I started working together, and it was in the context of yoga. It was postures and breathing, and there was, of course, in yoga there is a spiritual pers- foundation of it, and it's about seeking a deeper realization of our spiritual nature and so on. But the way that Desi was practicing the asanas, these postures, was completely radical from what I had been trained. So when we say, what is bowspring? First of all, it's an alignment that is for dynamic posture. So it can be presented and applied for functional movement. It's for daily life. It's for everything we do. Even the static things like we're sitting right now. You're you can do bowspring alignment while you're sitting or just standing still. But it's really useful when you're walking or exercising or working in the yard or just doing your daily chores, right? So it's an alignment that is so different from the standard model yoga posture because we have a much more dynamic curvature. It's much more wavy. There's a tonus, myofascial tone that's uniform on all sides of the body. So instead of focusing on like working your backside or tightening the front, what a lot of people think is like core and so on. It's really toning the whole thing. And then it's literally this dynamic pulsation where you're rooting and getting extension through this wavy central channel from the pelvic floor to the top of the head. So there is this dynamic alignment that's really curvy. That's bowspring. The method itself is kind of like a map, though. It helps us to look at where we are, not just physically, but what is the mindset? What's the psycho-emotional state that we're in that is reflective or expressing this common alignment that we have throughout the day, Um, and so it helps us to kind of see ourselves better where we are and where we want to go. And in so doing, it becomes this like whole shadow work practice. It's literally a much a deeper self-reflection. And then we're choosing to literally shift ourselves and our character, our heart, again, our soul. It's the mind, it's the body, but it's this deeper aspect of spirit. So it's the whole thing. So Bowspring for us is like that. So in a way that because it's seeking this deeper realization of our spiritual nature, I think of it as yoga, but it's so different than the type of posture you would do in a normal yoga class. People that come in not really having an orientation of what we're about to do, when they have their first Bowspring class, it kind of blows their mind. So this is kind of why it's hard to define it, succinctly.
Yeah.
Bowspring is, it's a new posture. It's a, dynamic. And they're like, what is that? Because most people think they've explored everything. They've done all the different modalities, and
Yeah.
there's nothing new under the sun, and you can't show me anything new. And then we show them and we lead them even in a few minutes, and they start having even energetic openings that really can be unsettling and uncomfortable. Deep traumas start to arise. They start to really feel and look at their own stuff, their shadows, much more directly. So
Yeah.
that's kind of shocking. And then the whole alignment thing, it's nothing what they had been told before by their postural experts, their physical therapists, their doctors, and so on. So they just can't believe it. So this is, it's been quite challenging, but it's quite fun too, to blow people's minds with it.
Yes, I hear you. It's so funny. My son, because, but Bowspring and Access Consciousness, the other work that I do, and some of the somatic stuff, like none of it is easily explainable. When people ask me
Yeah,
what I do, I'm kind of like, how much time do you have? Um,
yeah, yeah,
my son, my 19-year-old son told me not that long ago, he was like, Mom, when people ask me what you do, I have no idea what to say. And I was
yeah.
like, yeah, me too.
Well, we do, like Desi and I, when we travel around, even going through like customs in these different countries, they ask us, what do you do? And we say, well, we're postural experts, or
Mm,
we're into ergonomics. And then the person at customs will sit up straight or stand up straight, so they get that. That's kind of relatable. So it depends on the audience, right? And if we say we do mind body, a modality for health, they
yeah,
more people are open to this idea that it's not just physical. There is a mind element, there's a psycho-emotional element. So
yeah,
there is somatics, so we feel that it's a cutting edge somatic practice. And so it's been really fun, to be able to try to define it, something that's so fresh and so new.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got blurry all of a sudden, so I'm just gonna, sometimes well, I guess I'm gonna be blurry, so.
You can go to your in your settings, and there'll be the camera settings,
Mm,
and then there's a
the
touch up appearance.
or something. Yeah, I don't, yeah, there we go. Okay. All right.
Yeah, you look good.
This camera is so funny. When I move, it goes blurry, so I'll be very still.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Um,
the new AI.
yeah. So, so let's talk about the somatic piece of this practice, because that has been absolutely mind blowing for me.
Yeah.
I was a somatic psychotherapist. I mean, I guess in a lot of ways I still am. In the I started my practice in the late 90s,
Hmm.
and I did an enormous amount of trauma work. So I
Hmm.
did a lot of helping people process trauma through the nervous system somatically through movement and through, some verbal facilitation and things like that. And it was very powerful work. And I did a lot of it myself. Like that was a big part of my training, was to receive a lot of trauma therapy. And it was such beautiful work. And it was actually, for me, it was where I always say, like, the bodies have schooled me, and I learned from the bodies, my own body and all the bodies that I worked
Mhm.
with.
Yeah.
As a therapist, I learned, and I had been a very dynamic mover my whole life, like starting I was, my mom lied to get me into dance class when I was 2. She had to lie about my
Wow.
age,
Wow.
And so I started dancing when I was 2. I was a gymnast. I was a
Wow.
diver. I did all these things. And so very body person, And I actually, when I did my trauma training, I actually was like, I was like, I don't really have trauma. I didn't have any of the like major, if you list kind of like main traumas that people
Yeah.
experience in their life, I didn't have any of that. So I didn't actually think that I had any trauma, but I was required to do this trauma therapy as part of my training. And
Mhm.
so I had this beautiful somatic trauma therapist, and I did some very deep, beautiful, beautiful work. And I learned so much about how bodies unwind and reorganize themselves, and how the nervous system unwinds and reorganizes itself. And a
Mhm.
lot of it is through movement, is how
Mhm.
much movement. And this modality we worked with involuntary micro movement. So like the movement that
Mhm.
would just come when you were present with something, and in a very kind of focused, safe container.
Mhm.
And so bodies would just unwind in front of me. People's nervous systems
Mhm.
would just unwind on their own in front of me, and my own as well. And I was blown away by that. And I did so much of that. And then I started doing more access consciousness work, which is very energetic, a lot of hands-on energy work, a lot of different types of working with the body and the being, and all kinds of
Mhm.
beautiful hands-on energetic work, and also a lot of verbal processing and clearing. And so, I've been like deeply steeped in my own process and work and somatic, unwinding for decades.
Mhm.
And I came to Bowspring, and oh my God, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, and I actually, last year around this time, because I started, I guess I've been doing it for two years, and I dove in. I was like, I'm going to do this every day and see what this creates, even if it's. I
Mhm.
mean, I would be in a hotel room 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be like 10 minutes before I go to bed, because I was committed to doing it every day.
Yeah.
So I'd hit the
Yeah.
floor, I'd just do a little bit, and then I'd go to bed. And I started actually going, I'm going to do 100 days of Bowspring. And then I just stopped counting and kept going, So,
Beautiful.
and I was working privately with Desi I
Mhm.
did a, weekly with her for, I don't know, 9 or so months, and then started working privately with you. So, very steeped in the practice. And I had this major traumatic unwinding, I would say. I still do all the time when I do this practice. But last year, around this time, I would do the practice, and I would end up in an absolute just puddle of tears on my mat. Like,
Mhm.
and it wasn't emotional. There was no content to it, which
Mhm.
to me, in the work that I do, I always really like to acknowledge that a lot of times it's the body that cries. Like
Mhm.
a lot of times we put emotional story on it
Mhm.
when we don't necessarily need to.
Mhm.
Sometimes there is, but a lot of time the body releases through tears, and
Oh, yeah.
that's exactly what was happening. And I would do a
Mhm.
practice, and I could feel my whole nervous system changing, unwinding, and sometimes it would just be like, I don't want to do this. but I'm going to, so that still happens to me all the time with Bowspring.
Yeah.
And I would just end up in a puddle of tears and I would just I would ride it out. It was beautiful, it wasn't a
Mhm.
problem, and not everybody has this experience or this intensity, but it was so striking to me to see the deep, deep, deep somatic neurological unwinding that happened in
Mhm.
my body through this practice, through the
Mhm.
practice of opening our tissue, opening our fascia, opening our posture in a completely different way.
Mhm.
And boy, I mean, it was so humbling and so enlivening and so created so much change for me still
Mhm.
every day. And I just am so struck by that and so grateful for that aspect of the practice.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
love to hear it. I love to hear it. I think it's really interesting to say, like, why is Bowspring can even get some of the deeper parts, deeper stuff, memory out, where it maybe this stuff didn't come up with other modalities.
yeah,
And I've really had to contemplate this because it was same for me that, and just working in a therapy way with others, that in the past, stuff could come up and they can have some clearing, but with the bowspring, it's a whole different level of power. And I
yeah,
think one of the reasons is that with bowspring, your whole body, every little part is interconnected. So you're literally spreading your consciousness from your fingertips, your toes, to the top of the head, your front, your back, your right, your left. Everything is in this alignment. So there's really nowhere to hide. Because if, let's say, you were focusing on stuff in your solar plexus and you activate that and it releases or it moves, you feel better there. But we found that maybe that energy could actually shift to another place.
yes,
So
yeah,
here, there's nowhere to hide. So you have to go through it. And
yeah,
this energetic spontaneous releases, which are, we think of them in three groups, where it's crying is one, shaking is another, and some sort of emoting, like verbal expression, calling out or hitting or striking. This
mm,
is like the
yeah,
third. And what we found is that once the person goes through that, there is a diminishment. It attenuates or gets less than.
yeah,
So it's not like you have to go through the same, level of release all the time.
yeah,
And because we don't put so much of a story on it
mm,
either,
yeah,
it's not reinforced.
yeah,
It's not like, because a lot of times people are getting a traumatic release, and then the therapist will have them go through this whole thing about thinking of that time, thinking of that person that was the
yeah,
trigger. And unfortunately, we found that that can actually reinforce. So they might have a catharsis in the moment. They feel, drained or they're quieted, but the next day it's still there, or maybe even deeper, worse.
yeah,
So we're really interested in making progress. Let this stuff clear out, like it move out. And
yeah,
we can honor the past. We can learn from the past. It's not that we forget it. We can forgive ourselves and others and so on. And yet this energy really is transformed. There's an alchemy in this practice that's so
yeah,
profound. So the somatics is, I'm just super interested in it. I always have been. I started studying Wilhelm Reich's work in the 80s, and have gone through all these major somatic schools of thought. And I'm really so happy to be able to contribute to the field of somatics in a new way,
yes,
in a way that has this potency. And again, we feel like it's beyond any of us, personally, me or you or Desi or whomever, because we're just aligning to something natural. And I like to look at it scientifically, like, what is it about this posture on the front, where there's so much sensitivity and plexes of nerves and psychic centers, pelvic floor and the belly and the heart and the throat and the eyes and so on, to align it so that there is an opening, that the energy that had been held and in a way that in a protective way. So we don't think, oh, that you're holding that has been wrong or bad. We think, well, that's nature's way of protecting you
Yeah.
under the times of the past that could have been so intense. And it might not have been like a strong abuse situation or something terrifying, but it can be even just like a shameful event, or we feel sad about something, but it gets
Yeah.
built up and gets held literally in the connective tissue,
Yeah.
which we see as more crystalline structure. The fascia is more crystalline. It could mimic, because of structured water and the crystalline molecular structure of the fascia. It holds memory like a computer, and literally you can access, and this stuff can come up, and people have clear flashbacks of years ago that they had completely forgotten about, but actually it was still in there quite strongly. And then we can let it move, and they have a real freshness, like a storm blew through, and the air is fresh, the sky is clear. And they have a renewal of their own, again, self identity, where they're not who they thought they were. That
Yeah.
that little girl or boy in the past, or that they were, a bad sinner or whatever. There's a real alchemy that they become much more elevated in a spiritual, even psychological sense.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. The one of the things we play a lot with in access consciousness is this recognition, and that the body kind of has like its own consciousness, you know. So we
Mhm.
have where we look at like an infinite being, like I'm an infinite being and I have a body, and my body has a unique consciousness, and they're not
Mhm.
separate, but they're also not the same.
Mhm.
And the consciousness of the body is, it's so fascinating to me, and I feel like it's a lot of what gets expressed in such a different way through this movement, and the capacity for this incredible conscious organism that all of our bodies are,
Mhm.
to unwind, to heal, to unfurl, to become greater, and contribute then to like our whole life. Everything that we're creating and all of that is like, it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when you give the body these inputs, and you invite the body to, these different postures and movements, and working with the fascia in a different way, and in this way that is actually an acknowledgement of how our bodies really want to be in the world,
Yeah.
and free of all the stuff that we put on them, because our thoughts affect our bodies so much, and we
Yeah.
don't even realize that, like, we create our bodies every day with our mind. And when
Mhm.
we can let go of that and really get into the curiosity of what's true for our bodies, and bringing this beautiful movement to it, and allowing our bodies to just like unwind and open and become stronger and more powerful, it's like, exquisite.
Yeah. Again,
Yeah.
I think it's such an important point that we can think of these like almost like subconscious uh, parts of ourself. The body, we can have our own emotional nature, can be even separate. The mind, we can
Hmm.
have that kind of a linear rational mind, and more of the higher mind that'll connect into our soul and our spirit. These are levels of our being. And so with the body, we have to think of it like it is its own little vehicle for us, but it has its own kind of feelings. And so
Yeah.
to really honor that, and you can communicate with the body in a separate way, like it's a child. We and Desi taught me a lot about that. Just being really compassionate with our body,
Yeah.
and just say, hey, it's going to be okay. And you feel the body shifting. So
Yeah.
it's not like we're just all this one. We have a spiritual part that is incarnate in this vessel.
Yeah.
And the vessel, the bacteria, the different, flora of our gut has consciousness. It
Yeah.
has its own mind, if you will.
Yeah.
All these parts have a separate element, and I think it's really cool to understand that and to honor it all.
Yeah. And the body, like one of the things I'm so fascinated with is also like giving our bodies space to communicate with us, because our bodies as these conscious organisms, like they know so much, and that's
Mhm.
really what I learned as a somatic therapist. Like if I could get somebody really connected to their body would just spontaneously heal. Their emotional world would heal, their traumatic, the nervous system would just heal. And like you
Yeah.
said before, you don't need to have a whole lot of story. Once the nervous system, the body goes into its own spontaneous healing, which it absolutely has the capability to do, then it just unwinds and it's done. It's gone.
Yeah.
And I loved that work because it was so fast and so thorough.
Yeah.
And I keep exploring other modalities that are, even faster, even more thorough and more complete with the change that's possible.
Yeah.
Um, so let's shift a little bit now too, because I may, I'm going to go longer on this podcast. I hope you have the time, John. I want to, there's so many questions I want to keep asking you. Do you have time to keep going?
I have a 12 o'clock, so I have 20
Okay. So
minutes.
20 minutes. Okay. Because I normally do 20 to 30 minutes, but this is just such a juicy conversation. And uh, I do want to take some time to talk about the fascia and the more of the physicality.
Yeah.
Because when we started, one of the things you mentioned that was just really pinging me is the power that we get to cultivate in our bodies through this practice, the strength, the opening,
Mhm.
the presence that comes from the strength and the power and the opening of our bodies, and
Mhm.
the role the fascia plays in that. So talk a little bit about fascia,
Yeah.
and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's cool. Right. So Desi and I were actually just talking about this morning, because 20, 30 years ago, well, let's even just say, yeah, 20, 15, 20 years ago, I think fascia was still not that well understood and therefore not so respected. When I learned anatomy, for instance, 40, 50 years ago, fascia was considered something that, when it was even dissected, it was just like thrown out. It's just like, oh, it's just this, it's tissue that it's not that important. And now we recognize, wow, it has this, it can be the conduit for super intelligence. It can be, it contains the channels of the prana or the chi. It's really these vessels, these lines that run generally longitudinally. They run up and down the body, on the front and the back, on our appendages. That is a communication system. It is the system for our vital health. We can't almost overstate how important the fascia is. Now, in the last 10 years, especially 15 years, fascia has received a lot more notoriety and embrace by a lot of communities, and including yoga. But I think that we still don't understand a lot of those friends that are even teaching about fascia um, don't really understand the geometry, a bigger geometry, the way we look at it, that you could stretch fascia, but you don't necessarily align it to what we think of as more of a universal template. So in the
Mm,
Bowspring, we're looking at more of an energetic template that the fascia then molds itself onto. And that template, there is a universal template, but there's also personalized template that can be and is affected by our emotions and our mind. Even ancestral memory can hold that. And so our body the tissue, which is the surrounding tissue around our muscles and bones. That's the fascia. And it's made of collagen, and it's a triple helix molecule that has tremendous tensile strength. So
Mm.
though it's primarily 60-70% water, it is really strong. And the water element, when we say water, we have to think of it more like structured water, which is more like a gel. This is another thing that's kind of misunderstood. It's not like normal water, that we
Mhm.
think of just like at a liquid state. It's more of this gel state, a fourth stage of water. And so it can hold it's like it's kind of a clay, and our fascia can be molded. Now, for decades we've had, like, Ida Rolf became really famous on molding the fascia, and then we had structural integration and this type of thing. So we know that the fascia can change its form or its tone, or it's at the level of default, its shape. And the big difference here with Bowspring is that we don't see the body like that it's just some compressive structure that you just stack up in blocks or in segments, which is, even if you look at like the Rolfing model, even today, they still use an image, a graphic that just stacks up these boxes in a way.
Yeah.
So we're looking at it like, oh, it's actually designed to be quite curvy, and it's not. You don't have to orient it where the head is over the pelvis in this verticality when sitting and standing. That actually, if you move your hips, if the hips are behind the ribs and the ribs and the head are more in this vertical relationship, you're able to get so much more power from not only the muscle but the fascia itself, which has this tremendous springy aspect to it. So on a functional level, if you want to jump higher, you want to run faster, we use this alignment of the fascia to be able to access more of the spring. Um,
Mm.
there, and again, because of the fascia holding memory, it's holding all of this emotional stuff, the mind stuff about who we think we are in relationship to others or our world, our career, all the stuff. It's literally held in. And we have these universal human patterns, so that when we don't feel safe, we tend to close the front. So what happens, let's say that when we get scared, we all will pull the front short. We round our back. We kind of, Wright called it armoring. You literally put the hard shell on the back and roll up into a fetal position in the extreme case, right? And that serves a great purpose, because the soft, sensitive, psychic more elements on the front get closed down. They don't have to feel as much. The harder back protects us. So we're able to cope with the situation. But what happens is that curvature, which we think of as more like a C curve. So if you're in a chair and you're just slumping all the time and your back gets more of this rounded C curve, your fascia literally holds that. So the fascia can mold into a misaligned position.
Yeah.
So what we do every day, the little postural things literally mold us. We are what we think. We are what we're feeling. We are what we're doing all the time. Repetitive movement, how we walk. So in Bowspring, we have one of the first exercises we do with students and clients is we just have them walk across the room, just see what their default is. What's your normal way of walking? And most people have never had like any lesson on how to walk. They just started walking there when they were 1 year old, and then they continued. And what most people will do, pretty much almost everybody in the beginning, is that they lift their toes, they stretch their leg out to take a step, they put their heel down, and then they put their forefoot down, and then the toes come down. And we don't think about it, and we walk everywhere, right? But there's that kind of walk where when the toes go up, the fascia on the toes, on the front of the foot, because these are strands of collagen, they're not like muscle that goes from one end of a bone to another and connect by tendon. The fascia is continuous strands that go all the way up like to our head. So if somebody starts adjusting their foot while they're walking and they start feeling their hips shift, then they feel their belly opening, then they feel their breathing's changing in their diaphragm, then their throat opens, then their eyes are seeing different. It's like whole fascial release is profound, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm still stunned by it every day, and I'm learning every day about it. It's so deep, you know, it's so profound. But we see these big universal things that the front body is really the sensitive part that we face the world, and the back that we don't see, we hide and we close to. Um, and so there's like in the upper back, for instance, in the between the shoulder blades, we call that the shadow heart. So somatically, even when somebody has a rounded back, you think of an older person that is kind of slumped over. um, when you feel their upper back, even between their upper shoulder blades, it actually can actually go in like a indentation. It's like a dent. For the inside of the lungs, the inside of the somatic body can actually be small and shrunk, and that they've been hiding for their whole life in a way. They didn't want people to maybe see something about themselves. They didn't want to show that. So we go in there and we give them exercises of breathing and awareness, and they start to remold from inside out the form of the body and the fascia. And we show them how to activate the fascia on the back of the body,
Mhm.
and it creates this tremendous toning and strength that literally suspends the body. So there's an aspect in biomechanics that's called tensegrity, biotensegrity, where if the tone of the fascia and the muscle is balanced, it literally can suspend the skeleton. So you feel lighter. So you're
Yeah.
feeling like you're weightless, walking, jumping, even sitting, you're light, you're buoyant. It's not so heavy. And this is literally, there is a balanced science to getting the fascia lined up. And this is really new. So though the fascia is becoming more familiar, a lot of people are familiar with fascia, the term and the general idea. They still don't know how to align it for its full effect, and that's really what Bowspring does. And we don't believe that we're the only method that can ever be, um, but we know that this method works for aligning the fascia where it can have uniform tone, where you're able to have the most springy, agile movement with the least amount of effort. And in so doing, that's the same form where the energy, the somatic energy could move. So even though they come in for like a functional reason, a pain in their body, they start having emotional release that's so healthy. It's so healing.
Yeah. Oh man. My body is getting so happy listening to listening to you.
Yeah.
And I will say that that sense of buoyancy and that tensegrity that you talk about is something that I really experience in my body every day now. And it's amazing to feel how our bodies can just effortlessly hold themselves open
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like be grounded but also be like have that like anti-gravitational pull as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just and have this like springy openness that is just it's such a gift, and it translates into everything.
Yeah,
uh,
Desi worked this morning. She worked with a guy locally he's morbidly obese. He's like 400 pounds. And for I don't know how long, it's been, most of his life where he's been really overweight. And so he doesn't like get up and down from the floor. But
yeah.
today she showed him like, here's what you do. And she got him up and down from the floor, and even getting into a chair and getting out of a chair without his hands. And he was so
Wow.
blown away. And what it does is just opens his heart. It opens his mind to, what he can do. It transforms from inside out. And again, it's just principles of biotensegrity. So there
Wow.
literally is a science. There's a mathematical geometry to this method where the fascia and the muscle on all sides of the body help to create this anti-gravity effect.
Wow. That's so amazing. So, so amazing. And I know we need to wrap up, but I have to, I can't like end this conversation without I just want to acknowledge something about the feet because that
Yeah,
has blown
yeah,
me away so much. We could
yeah,
do a whole podcast on that and
yeah,
maybe we should do more.
yeah.
But you have helped me change my feet. You and Desi both have helped me change my feet in ways I never knew. Like I have strong feet. I danced on my
Mhm.
toes for years. I was an ice skater, but you guys have helped me change my feet so profoundly. And every time I change my feet, my hips heal, my
Yeah,
whole body changes. And
yeah,
that has been so exquisite to just see how, we can change. I mean, any, one part of the body, but the feet are so powerful for
yeah.
changing knee problems and hip problems. And oh my gosh, it has blown me away. I'm so grateful.
I want to, yeah, before we conclude too, I want to be able to acknowledge you, Heather, because see, even when you were describing, hey, you started doing this practice, and even though you had all this experience somatically, you had stuff come up, you didn't quit. See, most people, it's so intense and it's disorienting. It's just so uncomfortable that they just stop. The majority of people still, when they recognize the power of let's say the bowspring, it's they take a break. But you just, you said, hey, I'm just going to stick with this 10 minutes a day. And it is kind of, you use the term homeopathic. It's a little bit, just even the awareness starts to shift the field. The awareness of like in the feet, the toes. If everybody can just observe which foot do their toes lift up more, meaning like if they're just standing, and you feel one foot, the toes will tend to lift more. And in yoga, I used to teach lift and spread the toes, right?
Yeah.
Um, but what we found now is that lifting of the toes activates a hypertension on the front of the body. It activates the sympathetic nervous system. So that's like, so you're getting almost this underlying anxietal level of heart rate and blood pressure and so on's elevated. Learning just to soften your toes,
Yeah.
learning that the toes can be more um, mechanisms of sensitivity and feeling, and let the other parts of the feet work in a whole new way. Yeah, it just shifts everything.
Yeah.
But that's such a profound thing because it's the furthest part away from our brain, right? Our toes. But
Yeah.
if we can start to shift our relationship to how we're working in our feet, just doing the simplest thing, it's profound how much energy opening there is in the whole body.
Yeah, absolutely mind blowing. So let's just say to be continued.
Yeah,
I love
let's
to
do it.
have you back for
Yeah.
more. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, John. This was just incredible. I can't wait to share this with the world. And I'll see you soon. And yeah, just thank you for all the gifts that you have contributed and continue to. I'm so grateful for you.
Well, thank you, Heather, for putting it out. You're such a beacon for this new paradigm. And yeah, you've been courageous and just I so respect you for all of your fortitude in dealing with. It's not an easy practice. It's not an easy path, but you've done it with such delight, and people really they're around you and they hear you and they want what you have. So I think that's fantastic. You're spreading it in a beautiful way.
Thank you so much. I can't imagine not. So yeah. Great. Well, take care, everybody. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me for the Creation of Living podcast. If this conversation was inspiring to you, share the love. To work privately with me or for info on my upcoming classes and retreats, go to heathernichols.com. Have a beautiful day, and remember that the world thrives when you do.